Merci, merci beaucoup, Sheila. Alors, merci aussi à nos collègues qui se joignent à nous pour la conférence de presse. J'offrirai quelques commentaires au début. Ensuite, ma collègue Ginette Petitpas Taylor et le premier ministre Higgs comme les deux co-hôtes de l'événement qu'on a eu ici à Moncton depuis hier et aujourd'hui. Et ensuite, si les autres premiers ministres et mes collègues ministres fédéraux ont quelque chose à ajouter, évidemment, on sera très content de les entendre. Et ensuite, la partie qu'on adore, c'est surtout les questions des journalistes. So, colleagues, we finished what we think was a productive collaborative meeting of the Atlantic Growth Strategy Leadership Committee. It represents the first ministers from our region, four of Canada's premiers and the federal ministers from the region. We were also joined by our federal colleague, Omar Alghabra, the Minister of Transport, joined us last evening and then again today for the conversations around access, regional air service, ferry services, supply chain resiliency. So to have Omar Alghabra with us was also important. The main themes of our conversations today were around leveraging population growth and attracting and retaining a strong workforce. Obviously, having the Federal Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship from Atlantic Canada participating at this meeting was very helpful. Dans cette conversation-là, il se doit que des questions de logement ont été abordées parce qu'on est en train d'accueillir de nouveaux arrivants. Les questions autour de l'infrastructure et le logement s'impose. On a discuté comment on peut collaborer dans ces mesures-là. Increasing productivity and competitiveness of the economy of the region is always one of the themes that we discussed. Reducing interprovincial trade barriers, noting that the Council of Atlantic Premiers have taken, we think, some very innovative and positive steps around things like an Atlantic Physicians Registry, the Atlantic Technical Safety Agreements. The governments in Atlantic Canada have worked collaboratively and effectively. Our conversations were, how can the government of Canada be the best partner possible? And we obviously talked a lot about advancing the transition to a net zero green economy. Il n'y a pas de doute que la transition énergétique demeure une question primordiale pour tous les gouvernements. Les questions d'abordabilité sont évidemment une partie intégrante de cette question. On a eu des échanges importants, que ce soit sur le boucle de l'Atlantique ou d'autres mesures où le gouvernement du Canada peut appuyer la transition énergétique, non seulement des provinces, mais aussi des sociétés privées, a été pour nous une partie essentielle de la conversation. And finally, any conversation around the transition to a net zero green economy necessarily involves a conversation around affordability. We talked with the premiers, the federal ministers, last evening and again today around how the government of Canada can be a partner recognizing the regional impacts of the measures to transition to a cleaner, a greener economy. It's something that all governments share. We talked about the shared objectives we all have. So the part for us that's important is how can the government of Canada put in place the right measures that support Atlantic Canadians and all Canadians that want their governments to collaborate together in this transition. Alors, ça, c'est un peu un survol des questions. Ginette a probablement quelques mots à ajouter. Ensuite, le premier ministre Higgs. Si mes collègues ont quelque chose, c'est parfait. Sinon, on peut aller directement aux questions. Ginette.
Merci, Dominic. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And it's wonderful to be meeting my colleagues here in Moncton. It seems like every day we are seeing new data to back up what many of us have known for some time. Our economy hasn't just turned a corner, it's actually turned a page. Ces signaux économiques positifs sont très encourageants pour les leaders communautaires et les entrepreneurs de toute taille qui souhaitent voir le Canada atlantique prospérer de manière durable. Nous avons tous un rôle à jouer dans l'accélération de cette croissance et nous avons besoin de rallier tous les acteurs clés pour y arriver. So how do we do it? Well, I think like any smart business, we follow up on our investments that paid off. We take what we've learned and use it to hone our vision of the future. We work with partners and seek new opportunities on the horizon and bring them within our grasp. And that's exactly what we plan to do. Our discussions today were a chance to take stock of the results of the Atlantic Growth Strategy and see how we can refine our priorities to chart a course for the next leg of our journey. And that journey has to be together. Across Atlantic Canada, we are currently witnessing a remarkable trend. Individuals and families are choosing to make this region their new home. And it's not a coincidence. It's a testament of the untapped potential and growing opportunities that exist right here. But this also comes with challenges. And as Dominic indicated, we certainly talked about those today. C'est pourquoi nous sommes en mode de solution quand même. Nous cherchons à attirer la main-d'œuvre qualifiée pour les secteurs en demande. Nous travaillons à améliorer la reconnaissance des titres des compétences acquis à l'étranger et nous cherchons des moyens de répondre aux besoins en matière de logement. It's been said that the true sign of intelligence isn't knowledge, but rather imagination. In Atlantic Canada, we are seeing firsthand a culture of innovation that is taking hold, and this is creating its own momentum, attracting more innovative thinkers and giving our region a competitive edge. And it will take bold, imaginative thinking to tackle some of our region's most long-standing challenges, like air access and internal barriers to trade. We need to bring some innovative thinking and fearless pursuit of progress that has energized our economy to bear on these challenges and not let them hold back on our potential. And as Atlantic Canada takes its rightful position in the Canadian and global economy, we must work harder than ever to accelerate the transition to a net zero green economy. The challenges and opportunities that come with this transition are bigger than any one community and bigger than any one province. And here too, our strengths will come from our collaboration together. And that's why we're committed to working together on clean energy generation projects and improving access to existing sources of clean energy to ensure businesses in Atlantic Canada can adapt and also can compete as we transition into a net zero economy. We need to seize the moment, and that moment is now. We also know that competition for international travel is going to be quite intense in the coming years, and the time to focus our efforts on promoting Atlantic Canada as a tourism destination of choice is absolutely now. And that's why that I'm pleased today to announce that we've agreed to renew the Atlantic Canada Agreement on Tourism for $30 million over the next 4.5 years. This innovative agreement fits well into Canada's new federal tourism growth strategy and will help boost visitation to the region for years to come. And again, very happy to collaborate with the provinces on this issue. En terminant, la stratégie de croissance pour le Canada Atlantique est l'une de ces grandes idées qui n'auraient pas pu voir le jour ailleurs que dans cet endroit ici. Depuis plus de 7 ans, notre collaboration génère des résultats concrets pour les gens du Canada Atlantique et nous propulse vers de nouveaux sommets. Et ce n'est que le début. Maintenant, je vais passer la parole au Premier ministre Higgs pour ses commentaires. Merci.
Merci, Ginette. Good afternoon. Bonjour. I want to thank the federal cabinet ministers, Dominic LeBlanc, Ginette Petitpas Taylor, Sean Fraser, Goody Hutchins, Lawrence Macaulay, Omar Al-Gabra, and Seamus O'Regan, along with my fellow Atlantic premiers, Tim Houston, Dennis King, and Andrew Furey, for their valued participation in the Atlantic Growth Strategy meeting. We did explore ways we can partner for the betterment of our region. Nous avons exploré la façon dont nous pouvons établir des partenariats pour l'amélioration de notre région. This would include immigration attraction and retention and foreign credential recognition to help address worker shortages. We spoke of national housing shortage and the options for addressing the serious issues facing Atlantic Canada with the population growth that we are seeing. Infrastructure project to enhance growth potential and looking at productivity improvements to enhance our competitiveness worldwide. And last but not least, we spoke about energy and climate change targets being set by the federal government. These policies are causing inflation, rising interest rates, and the increase in costs for everything from fuel to groceries. Ces politiques sont l'origine de l'inflation, de la hausse de taux d'Internet et d'une augmentation de coûts de tout, de carburant à l'épicerie. As premiers, we voiced our shared concern that Atlantic Canada is being disproportionately affected by the carbon tax and the clean fuel standard. The clean fuel standard alone is impacting Atlantic Canada's economy 3 times more than elsewhere in the country, despite the fact that our region has been leading the country in the reduction of carbon emissions for the past decade. We were encouraged, however, by our federal colleagues' recognition of this reality and their apparent willingness to address this in a meaningful way for all Atlantic Canadians. These meetings can be meaningful, and it's only the outcomes that bring fruit to the work that's been done here in the last couple of days. Thank you. Merci.
Premier Higgs, thank you. If any of our colleagues at the table want to offer opening remarks or initial comments, or we can proceed to questions. So Sheila, on est prêt pour les questions.
Merci, thank you. We're gonna start with a couple of questions from the floor. So we'll go to the floor and then we'll go online. Yes, go ahead.
Wish to comment on this as well, but obviously, yes, we will be applying for it to meet the deadlines that have been put forward. At the same time, we will be seeking clarification and legal interpretation of the Constitution.
And so that was my next question, but why continue with that legal challenge if you're still going to be looking for those funds through this program? And do you worry that suing the federal government at the same time as you're trying to negotiate a deal will impact that?
No, I think that the discussions we've had to date are both, interpretation of what we believe in one sense of the Constitution and what my federal counterpart believe is what the Constitution says. So getting a legal interpretation and applying for that directly is a prudent thing to do, but also recognizing that given the deadline that's been imposed upon this project and the funding that's available under the Disaster Federal Assistance Program, that it would be prudent for us to go both avenues, one notwithstanding the other. So without prejudice, seeking both avenues. And Premier Houston may wish to comment on that as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the question. Obviously, this is a nationally significant trade corridor. $35 billion worth of trade flows across that corridor every year. Everything coming into the Port of Halifax, leaving the Port of Halifax, air arrivals. It impacts certainly every province in the region. So it's nationally significant. I don't believe there's disagreement on the significance of it, but I think there's a little bit of difference of opinion of who should pay. I believe it should be a priority of the federal government to fund the necessary changes that are there, the changes that are necessary there. So obviously the federal government has dug in and they said no, the apply under the program for half. So we'll do that, but it's also important, certainly for our region, just to get a reference from the court on whose responsibility this really is. Again, we believe it's the federal government's responsibility, but it's important for our region. But I think it goes beyond our region. I think this is an issue that we talked about at the. Certainly, I talked to a number of premiers at the Council of the Federation, and just making sure that it's determined who's responsible for these interconnections across our country, and it's the federal government, in my mind, and certainly that's the courts will have their say on that. But I think it's important that we look to the courts, given that we can't agree on it. Look to the courts for whose responsibility it is. And I believe they'll find in the fullness of time that it's the federal government's responsibility. It's a shame that we are where we are. It's not a good outcome for Nova Scotians to apply under this program, because by applying under this program, this is the cost is significant. I mean, the most recent estimates are $600 to $700 million. So that's significant. So that means that all of the other projects that we believe would be more suited, better suited, properly suited for that program they don't have a chance to get approved. So that means, projects across the province of Nova Scotia that are important to mitigate climate concerns and to prepare for the changes that will come with the climate that we see happening around us. They don't even have a chance here because we're being forced to put this project into that program. But the federal government has dug in on that, so we can't delay the financing. We have to move forward, so we will apply on a without prejudice basis to get that rolling. But as we continue to look to the courts to see, for their guidance on who was actually responsible for this, it's important.
Of the work to be done. There are three projects, different phases that are being proposed, and they're evaluating. So it's with our Department of Transportation and Nova Scotia officials that are currently providing the most recent estimate, which as my colleague says, is now at 650 million. That'll get further refined, I'm sure, as a final decision in terms of what approach to take. And I guess thinking about dikes as an upgraded road system. But we'll get further information as the project is defined. I wouldn't be surprised to see it increase further. And that's why it's important in an application, that we recognize that there's some variability in an estimate that's still somewhat in a preliminary basis.
Excusez-moi, est-ce que vous pouvez aller au micro, s'il vous plaît, pour demander vos questions? Merci.
LeBlanc, si je comprends bien, le gouvernement fédéral finance 50% du projet, peu importe le coût final du projet. Donc, si ça augmente à 650 millions, vous allez financer 325. C'est bien ça?
Mais écoutez, on va revoir la soumission que les provinces vont déposer avant 3 heures demain. On n'a pas vu une soumission finale encore. Alors, c'est hypothétique. Moi, je vous dis que le Fonds national se chiffre à 1 milliard de dollars. Il y aura probablement plusieurs milliards de dollars de demandes qui vont être soumis avant 3 heures demain. Alors, c'est un processus où pour nous, c'est une priorité de participer dans le projet. On l'a dit clairement. Nous avons financé aussi une partie importante de l'étude que M. Higgs et M. Houston ont fait référence. On n'a pas vu, on n'a pas les ingénieurs qui examinent ce genre de projet. On va revoir avec beaucoup d'anticipation le projet que les provinces vont soumettre. Je suis très content qu'ils vont soumettre le projet. On va travailler avec eux autres afin de s'assurer qu'il y a jusqu'à 50% des coûts où le gouvernement fédéral peut participer.
Dans le Telegraph Journal, M. Higgs disait que vous aviez promis 200 millions à ce projet-là. Est-ce que c'est la limite, 200 millions, ou est-ce que c'est vraiment 50% du projet? J'essaie d'avoir une clarification.
Oui, je comprends, mais vous demandez une clarification d'un projet qu'on n'a pas vu encore, qui n'a pas été soumis encore. Alors, un élément essentiel de la politique, c'est de ne pas répondre à des questions hypothétiques. Et vous demandez deux dans la même question. Alors, on est très content que les provinces vont soumettre un projet. On va faire l'analyse du projet avec beaucoup d'anticipation parce qu'on partage l'importance d'agir. Tous les gouvernements devront être inquiets par les augmentations de coûts dans ce projet ici et dans beaucoup d'autres projets comme ça à travers le pays. Alors ça, c'est le travail que nous allons faire comme gouvernement quand on va voir le projet qui sera déposé. Mais on est très content que les gouvernements provinciaux vont déposer un projet, puis on va travailler en collaboration comme nous avons fait depuis déjà 7 mois avec le Nouveau-Brunswick et la Nouvelle-Écosse pour comprendre les détails du projet, pour parler de qu'est-ce qui est éligible dans le programme fédéral. Alors, c'est un travail continu qui existe depuis déjà plusieurs mois. Il y a quelques heures avant que les projets doivent être déposés et on va ensuite travailler à évaluer les projets avec beaucoup d'anticipation. I'll take a crack at it. So I won't repeat the whole thing was really good. So if you ask me to repeat it, you can't choose which part you want me to repeat. That's not fair. I'm going to repeat the whole thing because it was excellent. The government of Canada has been working with the province of Nova Scotia and the province of New Brunswick for over 7 months on a potential project that will be submitted before 3 o'clock tomorrow. We're very happy that the provinces will be submitting the project. We understand that there have been cost escalations since the initial engineering study that was done, with a significant contribution from the government of Canada in the study itself. We will evaluate the project that they will submit. Up to 50% of the cost can be covered by this disaster mitigation and adaptation fund. It's a national fund of $1 billion federal dollars. We expect, as is the case in many of these programs, that there will be a number of billions of dollars of projects submitted from across the country. But I've said consistently, and I'll repeat it again, that this is for us a priority project for the reasons that Premier Houston and Premier Higgs have shared. Its importance to the economy of the region, its importance in terms of a trade corridor, its importance in terms of protecting the municipal infrastructure that might theoretically fail in the case of an extreme weather event, and you'd have a contamination of the Bay of Fundy. All of these are a series of very important reasons why we think this is a good project, and we look forward to working with the provinces in that regard.
Ma question est pour vous, Monsieur Leblanc. Depuis les discussions d'hier, les choses ont bougé. Pourriez-vous élaborer un peu sur le pourquoi vous pensez en fait que c'est de la responsabilité aussi des provinces et non entièrement du fédéral de payer pour le projet de l'ISP?
Merci pour la question. Moi, je ne pense pas que les choses ont bougé depuis hier, sauf que les provinces ont confirmé qu'ils vont déposer un projet que nous voyons comme un moment très positif. J'ai dit hier, comme j'ai dit au premier ministre des provinces depuis le début de la conversation, que parce qu'il y a une responsabilité fédérale en termes de réglementer un secteur de l'économie, constitutionnellement, basé sur les avis juridiques que nous avons du ministère de la Justice fédéral, ça n'entame pas une charge sur le Trésor fédéral. Le Parlement du Canada est souverain en termes de dépenses de l'argent des contribuables, comme sont les assemblées législatives des provinces. Alors, nous ne partageons pas l'opinion juridique de nos amis provinciaux. C'est parfait. C'est pourquoi il y a des tribunaux. Les juges et les cours d'appel et la Cour suprême sont toujours là pour trancher ces questions-là. Nous n'avons aucune inquiétude face à des litiges. Le gouvernement fédéral est poursuivi tous les semaines par des centaines de causes. On va expliquer pourquoi nous croyons que ce n'est pas une responsabilité uniquement fédérale. Les provinces sont propriétaires de l'infrastructure. D'autres comparaisons en termes d'obligations constitutionnelles pour un pont qui va à l'île du Prince-Édouard ou pour un service de traversier, ça c'était compris dans les articles de la Confédération en 1873. Alors, on peut avoir ces conversations devant les tribunaux. Comme M. Higgs a bien dit, ça c'est un processus qui va se faire. On n'a aucune hésitation face à ça. Mais l'important, c'est qu'on peut travailler ensemble afin d'élaborer un projet et j'espère protéger une infrastructure importante pour la région.
J'ai une question aussi pour vous de mes collègues de Montréal qui s'intéressent à la question des pesticides, de la façon que ça a été géré. Il y a un professeur, donc Blaine Higgs, qui a un expert qui a claqué la porte. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous avez à répondre concernant ce manque de transparence de la part du gouvernement du Canada? C'est ce qu'il dit, en fait. Il avance que le gouvernement manque de transparence quant à la gestion des pesticides. Est-ce que vous pourriez vous prononcer là-dessus, s'il vous plaît?
Pas facilement. Je ne suis pas au courant de la situation que vous discutez. Moi, j'étais enfermé dans une pièce aujourd'hui à présider une réunion avec mes homologues. Alors, les détails de cette situation, je ne suis pas au courant. Je sais que ça va décevoir vos collègues de Montréal. Mais la bonne nouvelle, c'est que j'ai des collègues ministres comme Stephen Guilbeault, qui vient de Montréal, qui sera peut-être parfaitement approprié afin de répondre à ça. Seule chose que je vous dirais, c'est qu'une des choses que nous avons fait depuis qu'on a formé le gouvernement en 2015, c'est de donner aux scientifiques du gouvernement fédéral le devoir et l'obligation de discuter leur travail. Nous avons d'une façon, je pense, importante, ouvert les portes quant aux sciences et aux essais scientifiques du gouvernement fédéral. Moi, j'ai fait ça comme ministre des Pêches et des Océans, mais le cas particulier en termes de pesticides, honnêtement, je ne suis pas au courant et je ne veux pas improviser un commentaire pour vos collègues de Montréal.
Merci beaucoup.
We will now take, oh, did you have a question, John? Just, okay, one more, and then we'll go to Zoom for the other questions.
Thank you. Question for Premier Higgs and Premier Houston. I think people understand inflation, but to hear that a report that came out last year saying the fix for the isthmus was 300 million has been gone up to 700 million, just more than 100%. Could you explain that a bit? Like why has this thing increased so much?
If I take a, the first calculation to an estimate that's put together quickly in the kind of an interest, usually they're like a class 5 estimates, which is not very reliable, can be a 50% tolerance or greater. In this case, there are several different avenues that are being looked at in terms of what the project will entail. To point earlier that there could be dikes in the setup, or it could be road raising. It depends to what level. And so I haven't seen the actual different 3 projects that are being assessed. But this isn't unusual in the sense of at this stage of a project, because we want to get to obviously a higher level of accuracy, and we should be able to get that pretty well here when we're finally there. But to the point, we've just been looking at this in the last 6 or 7 months with preliminary views on what could work, what might work. So that's why any of these projects, and we talked about other projects like the loop and things like that is understanding, because it's a class 5 estimate too. What could be the real numbers? And that's why so much time has to be spent in not only getting good engineering analysis up front, but also getting a really good execution of the project at the tail end. So you really know what you're talking about and you don't get surprises. Premier Houston, any comments?
Okay, and just to follow up, and you're an engineer, so you understand this. I was talking to Jeff Allerhead, he's a Mount A prof, and he thinks that the proposal that was put forth by the engineering firm was just one avenue, one possibility, basically making the dikes higher and wider. He's suggesting that more needs to be done to maybe take back farmland, turn it into marshland, to saltwater marsh, push the dikes farther back from where they are. He thinks that'd be a cheaper and better solution. Are these sort of things being considered by the departments, or is it steadfast going to be just this straight wall that will go up?
Well, I think at this point, we're trying to preserve what we have. And so I don't think there's a focus on taking back farmland as such. However, I do think that the options that I said I haven't seen yet, basically there are 3 being proposed, and there could be, various components of each. And that's when we'll land on what are the best cost options to protect what we have. Or to your point, maybe there's some land that would be converted, but I'm not aware of that. But we are looking at options, and that's what's being proposed. And I understand there are 3 options that are being considered.
Mr. LeBlanc, quick question. Yesterday at the airport, you said that.
Can you please go to the mic? Thank you.
Sorry. Quick question. Yesterday at the airport, you said any lawsuit against the federal government would be waste of taxpayers' money over the isthmus. Now that you've met with the premiers and they've applied for funding, your reaction a day later, do you still feel that way?
Yes.
All right, now we're going to take some questions from reporters who have joined on Zoom. We'll start with Adam Harris from the New Brunswick Telegraph Journal.
Thanks, Sheila. Premier Higgs, in your opening statement there, you said there's been a recognition from the federal government of the impact of the clean fuel standard. Does that mean the region's going to get an offset or some kind of reprieve? I want to hear from Minister LeBlanc on that, but also Premier Higgs.
Okay, so if I start that, I think there's been a recognition for some time now that Atlantic Canada is disproportionately impacted by the increase in costs. And that has to relate to the impact it has based on the size of our economy, based on the fact that we're rural in nature, all 4 Atlantic provinces, and that we don't have the mass transit that other provinces have. So there's been that ongoing recognition that that's a reality. And the discussion today, as I said, I was somewhat optimistic in relation to the discussion we had about, okay, it's real. it did go up. I think there was an understanding that maybe it wouldn't go up, but it did, price did go up in all 4 Atlantic provinces. We are a regulated environment, which is unique too across the country because there's a different availability and competition issue here in Atlantic Canada. And so that's why it's regulated, but it has a different impact on us. So I am encouraged by the conversation today, and I'll be more encouraged by the answer that Minister LeBlanc gives.
So the pressure, Adam, the pressure's on. You're not in the room, Adam, but you can feel the increase in pressure here.
I can see it.
So Adam, some of my federal colleagues may want to add something as well. But we did hear from the premiers, but we also hear from Atlantic Canadians concerns around affordability. This is a national and I would argue international challenge, but there are unique challenges in our region. That was part of the discussion we had, we thought, with the premiers today that was very collaborative. As you know, Adam, we have a number of measures in place to return money directly to Canadians, understanding that the burden of these measures needs to be shared in a way that is appropriate in terms of those most affected. And that would include Atlantic Canadians. So there are a number of measures that we have in place, but we're always interested in hearing ways that the national government can address affordability issues broadly in the region, not only in terms of energy costs, but in terms of other affordability issues as well. We're very sensitive to that. That's why we've acted in a number of specific ways, but we're always open to suggestions to do things that would respond to a unique need that particular regions at a particular moment may have. I don't know if my colleagues want to add something. My colleague. So Adam, that was such a complete answer that nobody wants to add anything.
Thanks. I have a second question. I wanted to ask about the Melford Port proposal. We've heard some concerns from Wayne Long, some concerns from Andy Fillmore about a possible third container port in the region. I'd like to hear from you, Minister LeBlanc, as infrastructure minister, because obviously transport minister is not there, but then maybe also Sean Fraser as the only federal Nova Scotia minister to see if he supports the project, and from Premiers Houston and Higgs if they want to weigh in as well.
So Adam, it's Dominic. That's a long list. That's a long list, solid list of people you want to answer the question. But the good news for you is Omar is actually in the room with us.
Oh, great.
So yeah, he's on my far left here. So he is the right person on behalf of the government of Canada to answer that. Maybe Sean wants to add something, but Omar, to you.
Thank you, Dominic. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me just say how exciting it is for the people of Atlantic Canada, the people of Nova Scotia, to hear about interest in investing up to $1 billion in the region to further expand infrastructure, to further improve supply chains, to further create more jobs. I am following this project with interest. There is an application to receive support from the federal government to extend the rail line that may connect to that port. That application is under consideration, but overall, this proves to Canadians and to the rest of the world that there is a lot of potential in this region. There's a lot of interest in developing and growing the economy of this region, and we're all following this with great interest. Thank you.
Thank you, merci.
Sean may want to add something. Sorry.
Oh,
sure. Look, thanks very much. I come from northern Nova Scotia, and it's wild to me to think in this part of the province we could be dealing with the scale of investments that they're talking about at the Melford Terminal. For those who might not be familiar with the project, the argument, and look, the project is under assessment, as Minister Alghabra correctly pointed out. One of the things that we're watching very closely is the global opportunity to take advantage of changes in shipping patterns. The world's manufacturing base is increasingly moving from China to South Asia and Southeast Asia, which creates some potentially more efficient transportation routes through the Suez Canal across the Atlantic rather than crossing the Pacific into Vancouver or Prince Rupert, of course. What's important from my point of view is that we don't treat this as a conversation that pits rural Nova Scotia against Halifax, against St. John, but creates an opportunity for Atlantic Canada to compete with New York and New Jersey and Baltimore and other port cities on the eastern seaboard of the United States. The assessment, I have full faith, will be conducted appropriately by Transport Canada. And it's important to understand that we're dealing with a potential private sector investment that will be in the many hundreds of millions of dollars. This is happening at the same time that we get news just an hour ago of $1 billion investment in green hydrogen from Everwind Fuels in the same portion of Nova Scotia. It's happening at the same time that Maritime Launch Services is looking at investing in a commercial spaceport in Canso, Nova Scotia. These are not the kinds of projects that anyone could have imagined when I was a kid growing up in this part of the province. My expectation is that the proponents of the project are going to have to demonstrate the business case. But if they can demonstrate that we're going to have incremental economic growth rather than simply shifting the economic benefits that exist already today, they would have a good case to make. So from my perspective, if they can demonstrate that this is going to increase the collective wealth of Nova Scotia and of Atlantic Canada, it could be a very good thing. But I have full faith in my colleague at the other end of the table, Omar, to make that assessment and render an appropriate decision.
Thank you. On va maintenant prendre une question en français sur Zoom de la part de Patrick Butler de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour. Finalement, ma question est en anglais, and the question is actually for Premier Furey. So sorry, but this is going to be in English. Premier, I'd like to ask a question I'd like to get your response to the new issues related to having to completely dismantle one of the generating units in Muskrat Falls and the Muskrat Falls transmission lines issues there. What do you make of those new issues?
Patrick, thanks for the question. Whenever you hear of issues on that project, it's never fun and never pleasant, but the project is certainly moving in the right direction. Of course, these technical issues are being dealt with by engineers and by the team that's in place. And of course, that's beyond my technical expertise. But I do have full confidence in Mrs. Williams and her team that they will resolve these issues in a timely fashion. And I believe, as she said as much to you and others as well.
Just to follow up to that, to yourself and to Premier Houston as well, you know, these new problems keep coming up. And so what is your level of confidence in Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro's ability to get this project to a point where it is reliable?
Well, you know, I think if you look at where we were 3 years ago, the project has made incredible progress. Of course, whenever there's a technical issue, it's frustrating for consumer and provider alike. But the progress that Mrs. Williams and her team have made has been just incredible to get this project to very close to fully commissioned. And while this is a setback, I think it will be resolved and the project will be back on course. As you are fully aware, Patrick, I mean, this was not a project that we set forward, but it's the one that we've had to deal with. And thanks to people at this table and the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, we were able to create a deal that lessened the burden for people in Newfoundland and Labrador. So while the project remains on track right now with this potential hiccup, if you will, I do have full confidence in Ms. Williams and her team to get it to completion.
Perfect, thank you. So just to be cognizant of time, we'll take 4 more questions from Zoom, and it's going to be 1 question per reporter. So we'll start with Stu Neatby from The Guardian. All right. Since we're not hearing back, we'll go to Erica Butler.
Hi there. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes.
My question is, I guess it's for Premiers Higgs and Houston. I'm wondering who is going to take the lead on this project. There's a lot of decisions to be made. not least of which is sort of the big picture on what type of structure we're going to be building to protect the isthmus. Who will take the lead? Who will make the decisions, and who will be managing the project?
I guess from my end of it, we have engineers from both province of New Brunswick and PE and Nova Scotia working on this, and they will bring forth options that I would guess 1 or 2 and 3, and they'll put the criteria around their best kind of estimate and their best proposal. And I would say jointly we'd be able to review those proposals and go from there.
Thank you. Now we'll take a question from Sarah Sobensky from All Nova Scotia.
Hello, my question is for Premier Houston and Premier Higgs. I'm not seeing a whole lot about the Atlantic Loop in the net zero green economy in this news release. Just wondering if that was something that you discussed and where we stand with that.
Yeah, thanks so much. We Premier Higgs and myself met with Minister LeBlanc yesterday, had extensive discussions, including the loop, and it was a topic of discussion today at these meetings. And so I think there's just there's a lot of work to do. I guess for me personally, to see that there's a viable project there that's affordable for Nova Scotian ratepayers. So we have a complete agreement on greening the grid. We have complete agreement that there's a role for government in taking steps to protect the planet. For sure, we agree with. There's a complete agreement on that. But on the loop itself, it's a massive project fraught with risk. Of course, there was just a question about Muskrat Falls. Nova Scotians have the historical scars and from the Muskrat Falls experience. So there's a lot of work to be done before I personally would think that the loop is the best way forward for Nova Scotian ratepayers. It could have a tremendous impact on the ratepayers of Nova Scotians, and I have to keep that front and center. But there's been lots of discussion, and there'll be some discussion about what the next steps may be. But for me, the only next step is one where I'm showing a business case where the rates impact on Nova Scotians is not to the degree that it is, and the one that I understand now.
So in addition, certainly I concur with Premier Houston's comments in relation to the option going forward. And one of the discussions that we certainly had at length is as we move forward, we all agreed we're on the same path of a greener, cleaner environment, and no one at the table and in the room at any point in time is denying the impacts of climate change on our nation. The focus is how do we get there and the transition and getting there, and what's that look like? And I think that coming out of the meeting, a lot was in terms of how do we put in buckets the required energy sources that are going to get us to the day when maybe we're all on hydrogen or we're all on wind or solar, and that we actually have that fully green environment and the energy source. But that's a while down the road, and so we're trying to put the blocks together. And I think that's coming out of this meeting. That was kind of a general agreement that we got to understand the science behind it all. We got to understand the components of the different diversifications of energy supply, so that we know that we can keep rates affordable. Because if you can't afford to turn the lights on at the end of the day, you have to stop and think about why are we here? So the idea is to be able to do both. And I think as we put all the blocks in place, we'll come up with a solution that makes sense for all of us.
Thank you, merci. And the last question will be from Jacques Poitras from CBC.
Hi, good afternoon. The question is for Premier Higgs and or Premier Houston. And on this legal challenge, can you hear me?
Yes.
On the legal challenge, is that going to be a full legal action? I heard you say without prejudice. I heard Premier Houston say reference. Is this a reference case to get a non-binding opinion from the court, or what exactly will it be?
Yeah, thanks so much. So we'll file, the province of Nova Scotia will file with the Supreme Court a reference question, looking for the courts to answer the question over who's responsible for the maintenance of the isthmus. Really, I guess in in short words, but we'll file, and then it's our expectation that other provinces will join us in seeking that the answer to that as interveners, but we'll file that in the Supreme Court, and we're basically asking for the court to answer a question.
Supreme Court of Canada? Supreme Court of Canada or provincial appeal court?
Well, I believe it's the Nova Scotia Supreme Court, but I'm getting legal advice as we're speaking, so. Court of Appeal.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Merci tout le monde. This concludes our event for the day. Cela conclut notre événement pour aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup à tous d'avoir participé. Thanks, everyone, for joining us again today, and enjoy the rest of your day.